never sleep again.
Are you afraid of the things that go bump in the night? Do you feel like a zombie after a long night of tossing and turning? Well, then try Dream from LifeWise. Just one tab daily before bed will leave you feeling rested and refreshed every morning. That's right, Dream from LifeWise. Just one simple tab placed on your tongue, it dissolves and let you drift into dreamland. Text Moose Dream to 754-600-9473 to get you started with your free samples today.
This is a warning to all living mortals. Moose will release 13 of the most terrifying interviews of horror onto the world.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to another installment of the 13 Horrifying Days of Christmas. I'm your host and gift giver, Moose, and today we're going to dive into the world of makeup effects and special effects, and there's nobody better to take us on this journey than somebody who's had a career longer than I've been alive, and a career that is just outstanding. So let's quit talking about it and let's talk about it. Please welcome Mr. Jeff Farley.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Paul. How are you?
Good. How's life?
Well, what can I say? I mean, it's the strikes killed a lot of stuff, and I'm not really pursuing film jobs that much. I mean, I think I have a short film coming up that I'm going to do. And the other things are just painting commissions and making little stop motion replicas for people. I've sort of I'm in my 60s now, so it's not like, back when I was in my 20s, like all of us were rocking and rolling, doing the stuff back in the 80s. And
the grind's not as necessary at this point.
Oh, I'll tell you, financially, yeah. I mean, listen, it's like I could always, always got to pay the bills. I'm going to be brutally honest. I mean, this isn't a career that I made a lot of money, decent money at times. And then other times, you're working on stuff where you feel like, why am I paying the production? It's like, it feels like you are in some ways, but, because you're paying in the most valuable commodity of all, time. But I mean, overall, what can you say? I mean, when you're doing really what you love, it isn't really working. It's just that you're doing what you love, and it's the thing that you really set your mind to. And I'll say this early is that, I mean, one thing that I realized, especially about myself, is, it seems like life is about goals, and I've been able to meet a lot of the goals that I set for myself. I didn't set goals that really, this is probably the only goal that I set for myself that really became a life thing. But the other goals, I mean, yeah, I was in a punk band, and I did a few things like that, and kind of exploring, what possibilities. I mean, I worked at my dad's sheet metal shop for like a decade while I was still a neophyte makeup effects guy after 1977, working on Kingdom of the Spiders, And in 84, I worked on Danny DeVito's directorial debut, The Ratings Game, building a couple of props for that show because a friend of mine got the job, and then the job was so low budget. He handed it. I had a bit of space, and I was young, and it's not even that I was stupid. I was gung ho to do it, and I was happy to do it. I mean, my work actually closes out the film. The final shot of the film is work, and then there's a prop that I built that, I mean, Steve Allen and Jane Meadows and Danny DeVito are all carrying, and it's sort of such a weird, surrealistic moment when you see your work being carried by these people who you really only know through a lens. These are people I only have known about them because there they are on my television. So yeah, it was kind of a cool experience to see that sort of thing. But I did about 10 years part-time in the industry, really, before, I got in makeup effects lab on this Stepford Children. And I just went over to the Serpent and the Rainbow after that. And I just sort of went from there. And I think to myself, maybe if I'd stayed with my dad's sheet metal shop, taken over, I might have actually made something with my life. But at the same time, I'm still very proud of it.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could have taken over the sheet metal shop, but at the same time, let's you look at all the cool stuff that you weigh the experiences with the, like, yes, financially, you would have been stable with the sheet metal shop.
Well, yeah, but I could have, I think to myself now, I see actually like just about a block away from here are these great like metal sculpture dinosaurs that like they're sheet metal welded together and they're like all rusted and stuff, but they're really cool. There's like a little Valley of Wanji type setup like about a block away from here. And here in Reseda, it's odd. We have like dinosaurs on the street, dinosaur sculptures on the street. This was kind of a cool place, but this also happens to be the place where Pete Peterson and Willis O'Brien did the effects for the Black Scorpion and the Giant Behemoth in a garage that Pete Peterson converted. So, but there's a few other things about Reseda that make it a cool, film town. But still, I mean, yeah, I'd still probably love the stuff that I love, and I'd probably give that up. But at the same time, it's weird. I mean, you have sort of this burning desire to do something, and it takes a weird mentality to kind of pursue this sort of job, because you never know, from day to day, you're going to get praised or yelled at a time. It's just sort of like stress. The stress levels run so high in this industry at times that you feel that maybe it would be better if I just, took a break and find some grounding and try to re-enter. And it seems like I did that a lot. It's an interesting choice to make where, you need to sort of choose your own, ability to keep your grounding. Really helps a lot in this industry. But at this point now, yeah, it's sort of like at 62, I'd like to sort of like use my creativity more deliberately and be more focused. And this painting has been sort of that sort of then this current issue of Scary Monsters magazine, 137, which I believe has just been released. It's got a piece that I did on the back cover. So
that's awesome.
I finally made the Monster magazine cover. So I sort of feel like a little, so finally, I've had a few pieces published and some European books and stuff like that. But a Monster magazine cover for Monster Kids is sort of like, that's the, penultimate goal. So,
well, I mean, that's ultimately where we all start is, the Monster mags and.
Oh yeah.
So who knows? You could be inspiring the next generation of you.
Forey Ackerman was only 2 bus rides away from where I lived. So once I met him, he invited me over. My mom and sister and I sort of invaded his place one day. He was out of town, but his assistant let us in. It's the middle of the week and showed us around, and we left our info. And before he found out my birthday was coming up, I think there was this ledger he put in your birth date and stuff was there. And so you put that, and he says, I see you have a birthday coming. He just calls me one. And after he gets back in town and says, hey, I see your birthday's coming up. You want to come over? And it was a Saturday for one thing. Those are usually the days he was open. And I was like, well, of course. So a couple of my friends and I went over there. My mom brought us over and found out that my mom had a friend who was working for Forey at the time. So that was an interesting thing. She hadn't seen this guy, and I guess he was a boyfriend of a friend of hers or something like that. I think originally I thought it was a boyfriend that my mom had. Turned out that was wrong, but I know somehow because when they saw each other, they recognized each other and they started talking. And but that sort of started that whole thing where I started meeting. John Landis showed up that day on my birthday and told us all about American Way to Shooting Us. And so Forey became sort of a secondary home for me for a while. I spent a lot of years just taking a bus down to his place and hanging out, there's a meeting Ray Harryhausen there. Forey invited me on New Year's Eve. That's where I met a guy named Douglas Barrett Jones at the Berman Studios on Empire of the Ants. And he'd worked on some other stuff there too. And he had been working at Don Post, I believe also. He was working on Kingdom of the Spiders and he called me up. Turns out we were both living nearby and near each other. And he called me up one day and said, hey, I've got these extra spiders that we Dremel all the seams off of. And I wasn't even what Dremel was at that time, but invited me over and asked if I had any friends. So I grabbed a couple of my friends and we all went over to his place for a couple of weeks. And dremeled the seams off about 300 or 400 spiders they would like use in the background, or they put on people running around too squeamish to have a real spider placed on them or something. But sort of an unceremonious entrance into sort of the career that I'd chosen for myself.
It might be unceremonious, but it's, I think, more memorable than some of the entry stories I've heard. Because usually you get like, well, I read in a magazine, started playing around with stuff in my room, making masks and things, and
I really, that was sort of, I think, an entry for all of us.
Well, yeah.
I'm not the only person who had this sort of experience, because anybody who sort of grew up in the Los Angeles area, was super easy to find people. I mean, they just looked in the phone book. I mean, Forey got some information from Jim Danforth about my mom was looking for their parents were going to buy me a Super 8 camera for Christmas, and they needed to get some information. And so my mom asked Forey calls Jim Danforth, and Jim's number was in the phone book because he lived close by, and he lived in Glendale also. And I called him to say thank you. And then from Jim, I met Dave Allen, and from Dave, Dennis Murin. And then I found that Mark McGee lived just blocks away from where we had moved away from in La Crescenta. And this is because I was obsessed with a film called Equinox, which I'd seen in 1971 when it came out in the theaters. And more importantly, I'd seen Dave and Dennis both on television of the premiere, the night that we saw the film. And Dave had his Taurus model with him. Dave had this, and he sat there and started moving it around and explaining the principles of stop motion, and I was hooked. I was like, I saw that, and my parents took my sister and brother and I to the theater that night, where we sat through THX 1138 and then Equinox, and my parents, somehow forgave me for putting them through that, but it turned out that a lot of Equinox was shot in the area that I grew up in, and I was frequenting those places as a kid, and I had no idea about it till years later. And you find out that the thing that inspired you actually is within arm's reach, and that opened a lot of doors, gave me access to a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have found had I been searching myself, because it wasn't as easy as it is today to find.
Well, that's what I was just kind of thinking. It's like it's kind of a double-edged sword, because while the information is easier to get today, when it was back in the day when it was just a matter of pick up the phone book and find the person in the phone book, contacting people was a lot easier. But as far as like looking up information in regards to where something's being shot or has been shot, or just specifics on things, or in this current case, your career, right at our fingertips.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is that really kind of no matter where you're at almost now, you find out that there's been something shot where you're at, no matter region. I mean, look at the regional filmmakers that have been, cropped up all over, the U.S. in the 60s and 70s that shot all these really cool, in some ways exploitation films, but they really, not only filled a market, but they sort of filled voids too. And they showed people that, I can do that too. I mean, the equipment's available here and we can rent it just like anybody else. You just have to go in with a valid credit card and the money, and people rent the equipment. These days, it's even easier because you can just buy the stuff. It's not even that expensive anymore. All of the, the work. It's, I think what it's done though, is it's sort of made people, they consider it to be easier now because sort of the technical end is a little more user friendly. But I'll tell you, all of the elements of production should still be there. I mean, I'm a big proponent of having at least as much pre-production time as I need to get something done, because when you get single digit days and you're just trying to get anything out that works, I mean, if you run into problems, boy, it's like you're just looking at sleepless nights. And I'll tell you, a number of years ago, I reclaimed my sleep pattern, and I'm not giving that up for anything anymore. It's like,
man, I don't know what a good sleep pattern is anymore.
Oh, nothing beats, like, I would tell you one thing. I mean, I've worked at shops where, I mean, it's like you go in at 9 a.m. and you just don't even know if you're going to see the sunlight the next day. And we had a lot of fun times too. I mean, it's not all bad, but it's, but I'll tell you, there's some where you just, I mean, after you hit a wall, and you've got longer to go. I mean, we had one place we had a show go 3 weeks over schedule. I mean, it's due on a certain date and we're not finished. And it's like it went another 3 weeks beyond that because of just so much that was pre-thought through. It was one of those things that I swore I wouldn't get involved in, and I ended up getting involved in. A lot of it was just because out of respect for the person in the shop and wanting to help. I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. Those are the moments you're like, okay, it's got to be easier.
So let's dive into some of the movies you've worked on. Just scrolling through your list. Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare.
Sure.
I mean,
Freddy's Dead, that was I was working for John Beekler, running a show for him called Son of Darkness to Die For 2, the vampire sequel to another film that he had done. And when we wrapped that one up, he was in the middle of Freddy's Dead, and he needed what he really needed was he needed an animatronics expert is what he needed. He got me instead. He had me build this sort of puppet head of Freddy that we shot, but it didn't end up in the film. It got cut out, and probably rightfully so. I'm not sure it would have edited in well. And it was kind of oddly done, and they wanted it to be a 3D gag with some little tentacles popping out of Freddy's chi. But like I said, I had, John gave me a mold to make the base of it out of, and instead of being a head of Robert Englund, it was from something else. And then I had to sort of add appliances to that, and then do all of this rigging work after I'd done all the mechanical work, I made a hand puppet. And it was interesting. I mean, I made it work pretty well, but I couldn't see how they really would have sort of cut into the action, and then I think it would have been a dead spot. But it was cool, and we shot it, and it was an interesting little 3D gag. But I did a lot of little set gags also, worked on set. Robert and Yaphet Kotto, Chris Robinson, Robert chops his fingers off in front of Yaphet Kotto. It was cool. I mean, wow, Robert's, cool on his own end, but Yaphet Kotto, wow, what a career he's had. And here I am, actually, in his presence. But yeah, it was a cool experience. I mean, it was neat being involved in that, and I didn't get involved in too many of the other franchise horror guys. Halloween slipped by, and I was this close to working on John's Friday the 13th. John pulled me in his his office. This is just when he found out that he had the job, and we were also in preparation on Arena. He gave me the option of staying in LA and helping him design and sculpt Jason, or going to Italy on Arena, which was really sort of my main reason for going to work for Emma to travel somewhere. Wow, Italy sounds a good place, and my God, they'll pay you to go and fly you over there and put you up and feed you and stuff like that with a better vacation plan. It was cool. I mean, it was a great 3-month experience. I mean, what can I say? I mean, working at the old Dino De Laurentiis studios and working with people who worked on Fulci films. And and not only that, the studio itself had so much of a history that it was cool. It was a cool experience. And not only that, I mean, again, being an actor in the film, and as well as a stunt doubling Armin Shimmerman in the film, in the Weasel makeup. So that was a fun experience. I got to do a lot of cool stuff, as well as everybody else. And I also played the butt end of Screaming Mad George's creature. So that was sort of, that sort of I think it's a good metaphor for my career.
You have a couple uncredited ones that I was interested in, and it's funny, they're not horror related, but they're two of my favorite movies. It's Iron Will and Tombstone. So when I saw those on your list, I kind of geeked out a little bit because I think I watch Iron Will probably 2-3 times a year. Tombstone maybe once a month. So
Now, I'll tell you one thing. All the prosthetics and makeup effects gags for both of those films were done out of my garage studio.
oh, that's insane.
David Atherton, who was the makeup department head on both of those shows, and I had worked at Lance Anderson's studio together previously. And we just got to be pretty good friends. And when Dave started getting those shows, he knew that I had a space. So he would hire me to sort of run the shop for the shows. And credit was really one of those dicey things where it was producer's discretion, because that's really how it works on every show. It's the producers can decide where they cut off a credit list, because it's not always, I mean, believe me, I know for sure, because it's happened to me. If you submit people's names and they don't end up on a crawl, and you're sort of like sit there,
Right, but I worked on it.
Yeah, that's just it. I did get a bit angry when I found out that my name was excised from both of those, because it did so much work. And then I look back and I apologize. I thought, what is it? It's still on IMDb, and people, they matter that much because you still do the work. And we had done something previously, though, which in some ways was a little more important. Another Western, which is sort of, I believe, the first one that we did. I think we did that before those shows. It was a Sam Shepard film called Silent Tongue, and it was River Phoenix's final film, the film that he had actually finished before the film he was working on passed away. But it also had Alan Bates and Richard Harris and Dermot Mulroney and a lot of other really cool actors. And it was sort of a Western ghost story horror flick. It was neat. And Sam Shepard showing up at my garage, one day to look at the stuff and chat about it and give his approval and stuff was really cool. I mean, wow. I mean, he's gone now, but that experience lingers. I mean, I never thought that I'd experience meeting, so, or even working with. And that one I did get a credit on, so sort of the other ones slide a little bit, but still, I'm really, really happy I've worked on those shows because, I love Westerns. I wasn't as much of a Western fan at that point, but I'll tell you, it's like when I started doing a lot of these like horror short films and stuff, I started getting this like horror overload, and I kind of like, God, I got to watch something while I'm working on this downer stuff. I started like pulling out spaghetti Westerns, and those cured my ill. They were like great. And I love those films, and been involved in some cool Westerns myself. I mean, more than happy, more than proud of that.
Well, see, and that's kind of what it is for me is when I get, on horror overload, I'll throw in some like old John Wayne or just some Westerns because, growing up with Grandpa, he was a huge Western fan. But,
Same here.
It's like a palate cleanser. You can just kind of reset everything, and then you can just go back into, all right, here I am. Here's where I need to be again.
Get off track and promote one film that I just saw recently, and I was so weird because I'd never heard of it before, and it was like it's only played once in the past month since I've seen it, so I'm dying to see it again. It's called Gold of the Seven Saints, and it's weird because it's got Clint Walker and a really young Roger Moore. It's really cool because it sets up like a spaghetti Western. It's a real it's an American-made flick, but it's really sort of an early proto-spaghetti Western type flick. And it was really cool because, the way the whole story unfolds was just like, oh, this is great. They didn't have any of the things like the usual things like the barroom brawl and things like that. They kept it out on the trail, and it really moved along. And Gene Evans from the Giant Behemoth as the film's villain, and Chill Wills also in it. And it was just like, this is great. This was like so cool. And of course, they have not run it on the channel ever since. I'm dying. I'm going to buy a copy now.
It's like, damn it, I just want to watch it again.
Tell me about it. It's like, when you find something that connect with, it's like, that's gold. It's like, that's, the way, film is the multiverse, and that's where you can really kind of see everything. And again, you do, doing something that inspires you, that's sort of it's an odd feeling because maybe it inspires somebody else along the line, and they'll do things, they'll get in, they'll do things, and maybe they'll even get further than you did. And, that's pretty cool. So, I've met quite a few people who know who I am, and I'm kind of like, that seems so odd because, believe me, I lead a pretty mundane life as it is, but I enjoy that. I enjoy having this sort of anonymity.
Late 90s, you worked on probably two of the biggest shows that were on television, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Babylon 5.
Oh yeah, those two, yeah, were by virtue of Babylon 5. I have a little story, but both those shows came really mostly by virtue of working over at John Bullich's shop, Optic Nerve Studios. And again, John has passed away, and bless him for all the opportunities that he provided. I mean, he was a great person to work for. And, we had put in some pretty long hours at that place, but I'll tell you, man, he really took care of the place to work. And Buffy came about. I'd already worked at John's shop previously on Space Truckers, and I was shutting my shop down in around early 98 or something like that. I decided it was like time for me to move back into my garage and save the money. And so I was looking for a place to work, and I contacted John, and he said, yeah, come on over, and hired me on the spot. And I went to work on, I think it was the episode with the hyenas, the were hyenas on Buffy. And then we have the praying mantis suit coming up soon after that. And these are like rapid fire jobs. And I was going on also, and a friend of mine, Dean Mersel, who had worked with the John Beekler shop, was running both of those shows at the time. And eventually through some happenstance, Dean was let go, and John needed somebody to take over. And he had me on Babylon, and I don't remember about what was going on with Buffy at the time, but that's not. But he put me on Babylon 5, and with Babylon 5, I'm coming in at the end of the 4th season, and I had a strange history with that show because I had worked on the pilot over at John Criswell's shop, and I was there briefly at the beginning. They had already done a lot of the work, and I was hired towards the end when things were really crazy in the shop, and helping them just crank stuff out. My main job was to be the makeup artist for Dylan. And honestly, I just didn't have enough time to really sit down and really work things out, because it seemed like the test day was the first day that we were like actually shooting the pilot. It was like we didn't have a chance to really pre-work anything out because the schedule was so rushed. So I really wasn't getting the makeup that well. And Gregor Ronowitz came in, and he and I tackled it together and made it work. But it sort of established a pattern where poor Mira Furlan, she just hated the way it looked, and she hated the way the character was, and I couldn't blame her. It didn't look right. There was a lot of elements to it. They would try to make the character androgynous, so they gave her all these prosthetics that sort of, kind of enhanced a male angle, but it was a really weird hodgepodge. And so eventually I think that whole deal with the transformation came about because of her dissatisfaction. And this all happened while I was off doing other things, because I was only on that pilot. I was there morning, and that was it. Left, and John and I really had some kind of came to blows, and really was sort of a happy situation. So, and honestly, I wasn't sure whether the show would actually go beyond the pilot. It's like you're never sure when you're doing these things. There's no guarantee that it's going to be picked up. So you're happy that you have the job, but if it gets picked up, that's sort of the icing on the cake. So I was shocked when I found out the show got picked up. A little bit shocked. I mean, not surprised in some ways, but surprised in other ways. But the show came on, and people started flocking to it, and it was doing well, which is cool. And I think Criswell was only obligated to the first film. They didn't have a lock-in for the series. So once the series went, it was John Bullich and Everett Burrell were brought in to run the show. And they streamlined everything and just made his makeups were just gorgeous. The design was beautiful, and the sculptures were great. Everything was working. So it became a popular show, and somehow I ended up getting back on it at the end of the 4th season and running the show. I was already working it, but suddenly I was committed to doing that in the 5th season, and all the TVs, which Mark Barbarino and I sort of did together. It was interesting to get back into that, because it was like it's a broken clockwork when I first came in. And then suddenly, well, let's put it this way: they didn't even have coffee. So we went in there. It was that's the greatest sin right there. You don't have coffee for the crew. You're like,
I'm out. Screw this.
Yeah. But when I came back in later, it was like a well-oiled machine, and everyone was just great. It was wonderful. Not that it wouldn't have been wonderful working with everybody at the beginning, but everything was changed at that point, to the point where it all was working. And I had a great experience. It was long. I mean, the hours were long, and I'd be sometimes the last one to leave and the first one to get in. And luckily for me, Mark Arborino ended up taking over Buffy, because I ran Buffy for a few episodes at the beginning of the second season. And to work on Buffy meant you had to drive way down, like in Culver City, over the hill, and to where the production office and where the stages were for Buffy. It was a long drive, especially we were putting in some long hours. But Babylon 5 was just, I mean, they were like maybe a 10-minute drive from the shop, so it was like a breeze. So I lucked out there. So I was getting a chance to work with Penn and Teller was an unexpected treat. So, and the director of that episode was actually a friend that I had known for many, many years, prior to even really getting in the industry. So it was an interesting experience. And Neil Gaiman had written the episode. So
which one was that?
It was called Day of the Dead. It's the 100th episode. So that was an interesting one. But yeah, Penn and Teller, that's something I never thought I'd work with them.
So yeah, that I could imagine that'd be a fun one. First episode back to Babylon 5, Exercise of Vital Powers. A friend of mine was in that episode, actually.
Oh, who?
Sandy Grin. He
No
was
kidding.
he played patient number 2 in that episode. He'd been in like 2 episodes prior as a captain of a ship, and then something else. But yeah, when I saw that on there, I was like, no kidding.
Wild. Wow. I mean, you know who it really blew me away when like if getting back to spaghetti westerns is like I have a soft spot for a flick, Lee Van Cleef flick called The Return of Sabata. The Sabata trilogy I think is great, but Return of Sabata I think I really like a lot because it's really strangely comedic. But his sidekick in the film, can't remember the actor's name. It turns out that he's in one of the Babylon 5 flicks that I did. And I was like, that threw me for a loop. I was like, and at the time I didn't even know about any of that stuff. It wasn't until later that I found it. I thought,
crap.
You know, great. I could have found out some cool stories about that stuff. But we did do an episode with Turhan Bey, and Jerry Gergely and I sat around him all day. I just chatted with him. It was a great experience hearing stories of working at the Universal lot back in the 40s.
Oh, God, that would be fun to listen to. Let's jump ahead to 2012. He worked on a movie about a leprechaun.
Not leprechaun, but not the leprechaun.
Right, a leprechaun.
Ours was called ours Leppy.
Yep, love me some Leppy. I actually have his face. I have one of his face pieces in my office.
Oh, no kidding! That's awesome. You know.
Yeah, Kevin sent it to me after our first interview.
That's so cool.
Oh my God, it's one of the coolest things I've ever received in the mail.
Oh, that's wild. Thank you. I didn't even make that for Kevin. It was like, boy, what a situation that was. I mean, yeah, you're talking about Leprechaun's Revenge, aka Red Clover, which we shot it under the name Red Clover, although the script was titled St. Patrick's Day Leprechaun, and then I think they tried to come up with some other ones, but Red Clover was the one that we shot it under. And then because Sci-Fi decides they're airing it on St. Patrick's Day, along with an entire line of Leprechaun films, when our film pops up, the internet exploded with anger from people saying, "This isn't a
Leprechaun movie."
And not only that, I mean, my God, it's like the whole situation arose from because I was moving out of my shop. I mean, literally, like my landlady is, she's going to be moving out. She's like in her 80s, and she's going to be moving out eventually because she's going to retire from the business. And so I have to start looking at getting out of the studio that I'm in. And so I ended up putting a lot of stuff in storage, but I suddenly got, well, it was Don Fauntleroy, who I had done another Sci-Fi Channel flick with called Stanley's Lightspeed. Don was the cinematographer on the Jeepers Creepers films and had directed some films, but he and Victor Salva were going to do another film together. It was, oh boy, it ended up coming out as called Dark House, and they sent me a script, and I was honestly a little uncomfortable, to be honest with you, given Victor's history. But I agreed to talk, go over the script, do a breakdown and a budget, and send it off to them. And they'd been working with Brian Pennicus on the Jeepers Creepers films, but I don't know the situation. But Don wanted me to come on the film. And so I had also at the time been doing all these short films with a guy named Drew Daywalt. We had been fairly successful. We did a web series called Camera Obscura with Jack Klugman, which was his last show. But the day that Don Fauntleroy tells me that I have this dark house film, it was called Haunted or something like that at the time. But he tells me, he says, "Yeah, you've got the job. Here's your budget. You've got the job." And I'm going, okay, great. Now I've got moving out of my studio, and I've got a job. I'm going to be going to Missouri, and I feel like I don't know how this is all going to work out. And wouldn't you know it, maybe an hour or so later, Drew Daywalt calls me and says, "Hey, I just inked a deal with Sci-Fi Channel, and we're getting ready. We're going to be shooting a film." And it turned out it was like it was going to shoot in Louisiana, like about the same time as the Victor Salva thing. And at first I thought, well, maybe I could hire crews to do both shows, and I could hopscotch between Missouri and Louisiana because they're not like really far from each other. They stayed away, so I figured maybe I could make that work. And then I think it just ended up that nobody wanted to do that, so I just talked to Don and I said, "Let's get a deal." It's like I've been tied at the hip with this guy now for a few years, and now we're doing a feature for Sci-Fi Channel, and he wants me to come on. And I said, "Listen, since we haven't inked a deal, I'm going to have to move on to his show." And he understood. They got Brian Pennicus to come do their show. But that was sort of the beginning of the situation. It's like, suddenly it's like I'm doing the show with Moshe Diamond and After Dark Pictures and Courtney Solomon. And the cool thing about it is Drew got me and got our cinematographer, Rob Morris, and he got a lot of us, the group that we had been built together as the short film, team. There's one person, sadly, we couldn't bring on, which really sucked. But a lot of the core people that Drew had built around him were on the show. We all went up to Baton Rouge together. And but in pre-production, I needed a certain amount of time to do this stuff. I need an actor to work with. I'm told that, well, Kevin actually called me, and right as I started the film, and I had to tell him, I said, "Listen, it's like I'm doing a show right now that you'd be perfect for, but they've hired a guy locally in Baton Rouge. I don't even have access to the guy. I had to went to a place that does mannequins, and I found a mannequin that was about the right size and about as neutral as I could, and that's what I built the suit on. And I sculpted a piece generically, and I said, I just have to make this work." And Drew wanted to go a certain direction with the look of the leprechaun, and I was happy to comply with that. But I had no time. The budget, they asked me for 3 budgets, high, medium, and low, and then I was given like half of my lowest budget to do the show. And then I'm given half of that to build everything. I'm like going, this is just, and then I'm moving out of my shop. So I'm telling my friends, I'm like pulling down my mixers. No, I still need those. Don't take those. Don't touch those. Don't, it was such a big mess. But I ended up flying out to Baton Rouge with the suit. We got there, I get there, and the production's still on hold. So we got like a half a week or so, or maybe about a week that we're not shooting. And then there was like another half a week or something break. And then there was like Thanksgiving come up, which I think we started shooting for a few days. And the Thanksgiving comes off, and that's another like long weekend holiday. So we ended up having like all these real hurdles we had to cross to get this thing And on top of that, the script itself, Drew did a lot of rewriting on the script because it followed the usual pattern of Sci-Fi Channel films, and Drew to give it a little bit more of a strong female. And he had an actress already in mind that he already hired. And we still had two actors though that they hadn't cast yet, and that was the grandfather, Pops, and the father, Connor, the sheriff, or Conor, as he says in the film. But it seemed like take forever, and that's really what the holdup was. That's why things were held up, because they were going through lists of people to hire for these characters, and they were saying, well, we've already done so many films with Lance Henriksen this year, we can't do another one with him, and this person, no, and that person, no, and that person. Well, we found out that they finally settled on William Devane, and that was a huge thrill. I mean, and he turned out to be amazing to work with. I mean, what a great guy he is, and just how cool is it to work with, the lead from Rolling Thunder and The Dark, and he just turned out to be everything that you hoped he'd be. He was great, and then they finally got Billy Zane, and I think they got him to come in like right after the Thanksgiving holiday. So they have this long holiday, and Billy was great also, and he made them wait. And they're going to pay him X amount, and he's kept telling them, I'll give you my answer later. I'll give you my answer later, and up to the point where they were like chomping at the bits, and he ended up getting like 3 times the amount that they were going to offer him for, which is a really smart move. But our film was like severely under budgeted because the other production company never put their money into. So we were operating off the half that Sci-Fi had. And it turned out the other film, which was shooting a film in the other production company was shooting a film in Bulgaria at the same time, was taking our budget and using it for every car crash they had.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it sort of meant, so we were operating at a real deficit. And on top of that, we went against every single mandate from the Sci-Fi Channel. Every film has the monster like popping out of the water. Ours was the monster runs out of the forest, pushes the guy in the water, kills him and throws him in the water. And we did all kinds of little things like that. But what happened was the film itself came in short. And so Drew ended up sticking around. They ended up sticking around another couple of weeks, I believe, in Baton Rouge. I was in LA and ended up having to make another Leppy head and gloves. So at least I got to see my budget creep up a little bit for every little addition. They, suddenly, oh, we need this. You didn't ask for that before, and it wasn't part of the plan, so that's this much. And so, but all said and done, I mean, I'm actually kind of like the film. I mean, it's kind of one of the better Sci-Fi Channel films. It's not a great film, but it's watchable and
it's rewatchable.
Yeah, we put a lot into it, and anybody who actually liked it, I'm really grateful for. It's like we that final day though. I mean, our wrap day, we found out we were going to end up having to shoot. Some of us are going to have to put in a 24-hour day. We'll start shooting at a certain time, and we weren't going to be done until daylight. We started at daylight the day before, and then shot all the way through to the next morning for the final scenes of the big explosion, and which we could only get one take from. And so. Oh, and then on top of that suit, that whole deal with I don't think it was supposed to get it in the chest, because I ended up having to build a rig to hold horseshoe contraption, but so I built this thing, we rig it up to him, and I have to cut a big hole in the chest to mount this thing, and it's covered in blood and stuff, and we shoot it, and we call wrap, strip Kevin out of the suit, and I put the suit in a trash bag, and I take it to the guy who's dumping the trash, and I say, here, take this. So that suit is somewhere in a landfill.
Get this damn thing away from me.
Yeah, and then of course they still needed to do more shooting, but luckily they were able to get all the shots with just head and shoulders and stuff. It's just like It was like that thing was, and they kept asking me like, "Where's the second suit?" And I kept telling production, "It's like when you pay for it, when
You
you
didn't
pay
give me
for."
enough money for a second suit.
I already had done like a few Sci-Fi Channel films before, and I knew what budgets they would cut at. I knew like what the lowest budget they would pay for on the show, and I kind of hovered at those. But I did more. Well, I mean, I got a higher budget on the Lightspeed show. I even got a little bit higher on Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys, but I never broke. I got not even 100,000 on a budget ever. It's been how I did that, but I got more work done on the Lightspeed show because the executive producer was great. I mean, he trusted me and he made sure at least I had what I needed to do it and be able to pay the crew and not stiff them and stuff like that. So that was a big, but you know, but it was cool. I mean, I got Kevin in. Here's what happened was I told Kevin that I'm doing a show that he'd be perfect for, but they've already hired a guy the guy was great. I mean, he was a parkour guy, and he was getting into stunts there. And I don't want to name him because I don't want to feel horrible, but I put him in the suit, and we just couldn't get him to perform. He didn't know what to do, and I was trying to train him. I was trying to get him into the mindset of being a creature and saying and doing whatever I could, but he wasn't getting it. We came to a day where we had some real important shots to do, and it was just not working. They had to really edit around a lot of the stuff. It was the day of the parade, and that everything came to a head at that point, and they let him go. And then they came back to me and said, "Well, what about your friend?" Because I already told them, I said, "Listen, I knew somebody was perfect for this role, and he's a lot of experience already." And so we made a panic call to Kevin, and luckily he wasn't doing anything at the time. And he, hopped on a plane that night, flew out, and we set up, and I got him fitted into the suit. And I had already done a new appliance for the face because the first one I did was deemed not scary enough, which is a little bit of a ploy on my part because they were underpaying me so much. But I said, "The heck with it." And they wanted something scarier. So I ended up live casting Tony in the cowl and then sculpting a new piece. And then we have a new guy come in who still doesn't fit the appliance, but I managed to make it work on Kevin and refit the teeth for him. And the guy named Daniel Jouet made out in Baton Rouge for me. And it was like, we made it. We made it through that show, and it aired. And the most disappointing part for me was while we were shooting, they unveil a sign that's supposed to be used in a shot. And Drew managed to get my name. I'm of Irish heritage, and he tried to get as many people as Irish names in it. And so he had this gigantic sign made for like Farley Feed and Grain or something, and they place it in a shot, and they do the shot. And I think, this is awesome. A little bit of an in joke, a little bit of a nod, in the film. And about maybe an hour or so before the film airs, in its premiere, I make a post. I post the picture on Facebook along with a little post about it. And I send it off, and Drew sees it, and he nods at me, and he just goes, "They cut it out of the film." So it's just like, that was just like, thanks, guys, So there you go. There's my, that's sort of like said it all right. My Leprechaun experience. But again, no, it was never supposed to be part of the Leprechaun series.
It was just a movie about a leprechaun.
Yeah, it was supposed to have been like a separate movie, but again, it was sort of a title blunder. I mean, really, I think if they would have just, they would have advertised it under Red Clover, it might have actually done it. Or they people might have understood a bit better. But, having Thanksgiving, past this past week, it made me think about that day, because when we were shooting out there, Thanksgiving fell while we were in production out in Baton Rouge, and a group of us from LA all together living in a little compound that Moshe Diamond had. He had this whole little compound with little townhomes and apartment buildings that all the crews lived in. Like all the instead of putting us up in hotels, they put us up in this little place, and it was cool. I mean, it was a nice place for us, but we had Thanksgiving there, so we all ended up getting together, including all of us from LA, including Billy and William Devane. We all had Thanksgiving dinner together,
Nice.
and that really special occasion. So that was a great day.
We're going to do a little time traveling here. We're going to move forward, but backwards. Let's talk about the movie that broke the internet when it was announced that it was going to finally get finished.
Yeah.
Let's talk about David Allen's The Primevals.
Oh, yeah. We could go backwards and forwards with that one.
Yeah. 50 years in the making. It's insane.
Well, I mean, first announced in Famous Monsters in the early 70s, I believe, but it was conceived in about 68, I believe. It was after David finished Equinox in 67. He started putting together, him and Dennis, and then eventually Jim Danforth all put together a project, and it ended up being called Raiders of the Stone Ring. And eventually, after that, went through a number of different title iterations, including when Hammer Films had it and tried to market it as Zeppelin versus Pterodactyls. Dave took the property, and him and Randy Cook rewrote it as the Primevals. And that was around 1978 when Charlie Band came in, and that's when I first met Dave, was when he was in pre-production on the show. I went over to his studio in Burbank, saw a lot of the items, saw a sculpture. It was a photo of Dave Carson sculpting this sort of four-legged beast of burden type creature, and I got to see that in person, and as well as the original arena set, and the mind control gun, some of the lizard men, and I said to myself, I said, God, I'd love to work on this. Boy, I'd really like to be involved in a show like this. And at that time, I mean, Ray Harryhausen was still active, and there was a lot of stop motion shows going on at the time. So it didn't, the dream was there, but it didn't seem so urgent because it was all that. And eventually digital started eating away at the stop motion work, which luckily hasn't been too great considering we have a new Wallace and Gromit coming up, and there's Nightmare Before Christmas is a classic as it is, and so the art form still exists, but nobody really does it the way that Ray did it anymore. And the Primevals sort of brought back the promise of having sort of an adventure story with creatures in the stop motion role rather than the human form, which seems to have sort of overtaken the stop motion world at this point.
Yeah.
There's been some examples where films, was it The Fifth Voyage of Sinbad, films like that did bring in stop motion creature type. So that was definitely a step in the right direction. But with Dave, I mean, this being a total passion project with him writing and producing and directing as well as supervising the film's post-production effects. Not many people would even take on a role like that. Jim Danforth would have been the closest. I don't even think Ray Harryhausen ever intended on directing anything other than the sequences that he was involved in. He probably just thought it's too much of a headache to try to do the whole thing himself. But yeah, again, the film sort of disappeared after 78 and 79. The film, the funding, Charles Band wasn't able to get as much funding as they needed for the show, so it sort of went on hold. And it wasn't until around 1994, and I was sharing a house with a guy named David Matherly, and he comes in one day and says, "Hey, guess what? The Primevals is going again, and going to be over at Steve Neal's building hominid suits." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." I mean, I was already working somewhere else, and what the deal is, but about the time they came to shoot, Dave had been working at Todd Masters also on Tales of the Crypt Demon Night, and he decided to stick around in LA instead of going to Romania and handle the suits as well as Mark Rappaport's stuff that he had made for the show. They needed somebody, and I went down and spoke with Charlie and a number of other people. And since I'd already been working for John Beekler and Empire and stuff, so that sort of broke the ice there. And that was, I think, the first real, there's the first real full moon show that I'd worked on. They trusted me to go over and run the makeup and creature effects department, the live action stuff for the show, and went over and found out there was almost nothing to work with. They hadn't really sent over much. There was another show going, and we were like, we each had like kind of threadbare supplies to do the shows, and I brought over a lot of stuff with me. I mean, if I had brought over like the things that I had brought, like just care packages of like adhesives and sewing supplies and things like that. I mean, I don't know what I really I ended up rebuilding the hominid suits and tailoring them to fit me, because they all sort of fit me. So that's like the first 2 weeks I was there while I was in Romania, while the rest of the crew was up in the Italian Alps shooting. I sat and was tearing apart hominid suits and resewing elbows and knees and things like that to help to make sure they weren't going to fall off in the middle of the shot. So, but overall, it was a really interesting experience, because it was a very tough shoot. The language barrier was there, but somehow, I mean, we really managed to make things work. And I think one of the biggest like pluses on the show is we had Adolfo Bartoli, who just passed away also, as cinematographer on the show. And it was a few years after that he admitted to me that he was a camera assistant on Jason and the Argonauts. So he had some experience, those types of shows. And I'll tell you, boy, having him aboard, I mean, what an amazing experience. And everybody on the show was great. I mean, my first time in Eastern Europe, and you're working an entirely new group of people. And I really didn't, I mean, other than Dave, I didn't really know anybody. Chris Endicott was the only other person I really sort of knew there on that show. And the other show, Josh Kirby Time Warrior, was Ernie Farino, and Chris Bergschneider ended up taking over effects department on that show. But yeah, it's sort of like, reestablish new friendships with people, and finding out working with Juliet Mills on the Primevals was a bit of a thrill also.
Yeah, well, I can imagine.
Yeah, I grew up watching Nanny and the Professor, and then finding out you're working with her, and she's every bit as wonderful as you would hope she would be. So
it's crazy.
9 weeks. It was a 9-week shoot in Romania. And we counted our per diem with a ruler. The money had such little value that they'd give us X amount per week for per diem to live on, and it would literally be like a stack like this. Count it with a ruler. It's like okay, that looks pretty good. That's
I got about a foot of money. We're okay.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it was cool. I mean, it was an interesting situation, and it's so funny too, because the lei, the official currency of Romania, there was one bill. It was a 5 lei piece, and the image on it looked like Ted Nicolau. I mean, it was an image of Ted Nicolau. So we ended up starting to. Well, this had started before I got there, but I got into the practice, the habit of saying, it's like you get some change. You're looking, give me a couple of Teds.
Damn, how much work you got to do in a country to get your quasi likeness put on the bills?
I know. I can't remember what prince it was. It was like some prince or something on the on the bill, but it really was literally the spitting image of Ted Nicolau. I say that all in great, due respect, so, but yeah, when we came back, Dave had 4 years to work on the show, or 4 or 5 actually. But no, I think they actually started back up production in early 95. And then he worked until 99, until unfortunately he passed away. And I'd seen him maybe a couple of weeks before at a screening of another film that Chris and I had done for Fulman, and it was just heartbreaking to see Dave in condition. I mean, knowing that Chris and Charlie both finally were able to get the show back together, and finish it to the degree that it is, because I mean, I've got an entire shooting script here from the film still, and I can go through it, and I know like where there's gaps and where things are, unfinished. And the film itself was always going to maybe a little bit of an unfinished feel, because especially with Dave's version, with the animatics added into it and stuff. But to get Dave's vision across, it's really necessary to have those so that you can kind of get an idea of what he was planning. And there's enough of the film there finished to see what it is. And, I have to admit it has a bit of a dated feel to it, considering filmmaking these days. But that was back when actors still acted and still had conviction in their roles and didn't let post-production do the acting for them. It was a cool experience. And Robert Cornthwaite. I mean, what can I say about having Robert Cornthwaite from Thing from Another World? Dave tells me one day, he just comes up to me and says, Robert Cornthwaite's flying in tomorrow. I'm like, for Thing from Another World, he's still with us. And it turned out, he's still been working regularly, and he was flying in to do his bit for the film. And I was thrilled. I mean, I ended up having breakfast with him the following morning, and I got The Thing from Another World was a film that scared the heck out of my dad when he was a kid, and he so I got a signature, from Robert for him, and he just, again, one of those amazing experiences, somebody you never expect you're ever going to meet, and there you are. So I'm probably one of the few perks of working in the industry is the people that you.
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna have to have you on again because we barely scratched your career.
It was almost 50 years. I mean, it's like, how many decades do you have? So,
and I want to hear more. That's the addictive part of this job is I know you have stories and I want to hear them.
Oh, sure.
But in incremental sessions. So
there you go. I'd be happy to come back.
That's amazing. Do you have any social medias or websites that listeners can follow you on, buy your paintings or anything like that?
No, you can. As Facebook, I just go under my name, Jeff Farley, and my friend list usually hovers at 5,000. But I'm thinking about starting a second one. And then there's Obscure Artifacts on Facebook also. And Instagram, I'm under just one word, all lowercase, Obscure Artifacts. IMDb, Jeffrey S. Farley. There's the long moniker. And I have a website, and it is jefffarleyfineart.com. That's where things are, or some of my paintings are, but you're not obligated to buy. You want to go look.
Buy them anyway.
Sale would be a good thing, but still, getting eyes on it. That's the important thing. Like I said, I've got the Scary Monsters magazine issue 137, which is, I believe, just hit the shelves on November 27th. It's their big winter issue, and on the back cover is my War of the Colossal Beast piece. So I'm thrilled. It's a back cover, but that's one small step to a front cover.
So it's still a cover. You're not buried on like page 52.
Yeah, it's even that's cool. I mean, it's like I've got stuff printed in a couple of European books, and that's people they'll know about me in Europe, but here, but still, I just got a couple of little commission for painting, and so anything to pay the bills. And I believe next year though I have some managership in the Midwest now, and this isn't penciled in completely, but next April I will probably be in Chicago doing a screening of the Garbage Pail Kids movie. So keep your eyes out for that one. So
interesting.
So interesting. It'd be a lot of fun to do that. That was my very first screen credit, as well as the film was released on my birthday. So I guess I kind of I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but there it is. There's my that is a cult film. If there ever
absolutely is. And listeners, I'll put all those links in the episode description. You can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com. Be sure to follow me on Facebook at Moose's Monster Mash or on YouTube at Moose Media Inc. Jeff, this has been a blast.
Paul, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you.
And I do look forward to the next time we have a chance to sit down and talk, because there's a lot more I want to dive into.
Absolutely. Hopefully I'll have eaten something before, because my stomach's starting to rumble. So I need to get something to eat right now. So maybe you watch a man collapse in front of your very eyes. So.
Go check out his artwork. And come back tomorrow for another installment of the 13 Horrifying Days of Christmas. And until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.
This has been Moose's Monster Mash. Come back for more chills and thrills if you dare.